Greetings. Today's talk is a continuation of our last show, and it relates to the attack on Tesla by the Saudis. But today we introduce a concept called the prisoner's dilemma. We also have some other cleanup items on what's going on with Tesla right now that I think you guys will find interesting. And so I look forward to any and all comments and your input on our show today. This is oh, crazy. Hey, Bob. Greetings. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat visitor like Bob, welcome back. Also note, we're on Patreon and could use your support there. And watching 8 or 9 seconds of ads is also supportive to the channel. I really like having some B-roll running, and I'm on the road, not in my usual location, so I might jump back to make sure our B-roll continues to run as we're doing our show, which I'm going to do right now. Let's go back to it. So one of the challenges we ran into yesterday was that we were having some issues with the fact that spitting out our show took longer than many people wanted, so we kind of cut short at about the 6:11 time point. We were getting into discussion of what's happening with the frackers. So basically what happens right now in general is that the higher the oil or fuel prices is, a lot of people will start driving SUVs or stop driving SUVs and switch over and start driving more fuel efficient cars because of the price of fuel. So the Saudis and other OPEC members are really aggressive about making sure that they try to lower the price so it doesn't get too high, and therefore everyone starts saving fuel or using alternative energy techniques in order to control how much they're spending. So what's interesting about the situation is, and what I wanted to introduce today, is a concept called the prisoner's dilemma. There's a portion of economics that's called game theory, and under game theory, under the concept of game theory, what happens is that an example of it in prisoner's dilemma is if you have two prisoners and those prisoners are committed a crime together, the way it works, if both people that committed the crime say nothing, they get away free. If one person admits what occurred, they go free and the other person doesn't. And so you get the idea of how this works. Well, it turns out that this is the process for how prices are usually set for a lot of goods or services. So if someone down the street is selling something at a lot lower price than you are, you all of a sudden run into the problem that nobody will buy from you. They'll simply go there. So when we look at oil prices and the power it has to move the entire market, as you've seen over the last few weeks, one of the issues that's coming up is there are many groups that are producing oil. The most important sort of swing group right now is a group called frackers. So the people who do fracking are running a cost basis after shipment in the 40 plus range, more like between $45 and $50 a barrel, particularly if they aren't able to ship by pipeline, but they're shipping by rail from where the oil is produced to the refineries. So the disaster that's occurring right now is that as oil prices fall, it starts to get closer and closer to the cost that these folks have. So the solution that the frackers have had is that if they can produce as much oil as possible, as fast as possible, it sets them up in a perfect situation to earn as much money as possible before the price of oil falls below their cost. So basically, one group, which is probably 20% of the oil out there, is the fracking group, and they're the fastest growing, and they're in trouble if oil prices continue to fall, Hence, they're aggressive about putting a lot of shifts in to produce and sell as much oil as possible. There are other groups that are out there. For example, Saudi Arabia only has a $10 per barrel cost basis, so they can afford to take the pain of a lower price better than most. But there are certain countries that have a higher price. For example, in Canada, they do a type of extraction from oil, from the oil sands, and they too have a very high cost basis. And so there are many folks who are in need of, my backdrop went out, I think I'll have to kill it here. So bottom line is that there are a lot of people that are producing and trying to get their oil to market. And the concern is the lower the prices, they now have to shut down operations or stop extraction because they can't make any money at it. So I'm bringing up this whole story because basically what happens is when oil prices get cut in half from about 80 bucks to about 40, where it looks like it's going, all those companies associated with it will have their earnings cut in half. And with an unknown when the prices are going to rise again, that means that in sympathy to this, the stock market has to fall. And as we watch Tesla's stock, you notice that it's going down, even though in general the news has been positive. So in essence, the whole oil industry is being kind of strangled by this whole phenomenon of the prisoner's dilemma on prices, and kind of where are things going is sort of the question mark, and the answer is lower. So then you toss in a few of the companies like Facebook or Google, etc., whose prices are down based on slowing growth, and hence we have a heavy move of the stock market down right now, and it somewhat takes Tesla with it. So I wanted to finish up the concept of it's really worth taking time to read about the prisoner's dilemma because it has a lot of wrinkles to it, and it's part of game theory and economics, and I think it's an important thing to understand. A little bit of its application to Tesla might be the fact that to some extent, because Tesla is sort of a monopoly, they need to keep somewhat in mind what pricing is, but they're not under the same pricing pressure that competitors might be, where they have a number of companies that all have similar products. And that means that you end up with fairly small margins on your vehicle in those cases. One example for Tesla that comes to mind is that Daimler-Benz chose to withdraw their, Daimler-Benz withdrew their home power storage factor because Tesla's Power Pack 2 that came out for your garage was half the cost and almost double the amount of power storage. So Daimler wasn't getting much traction here in the United States with that product, and I thought it was interesting that it's a better move for them to link up that product with an electric vehicle for a combo sale than it is to try to sell into a market where most of the buyers might actually be Tesla customers that already have a working relationship with Tesla and a better product that Tesla offers them. So I just wanted to note in general that I thought that it was an interesting move on the part of Daimler to come out with it, but they got slammed by Tesla's lower cost of production and the fact that they were producing their product rather than relying on a partner to do so, which further made it difficult for Daimler to make any money off that product. The next thing I wanted to sort of review is that, the price of Tesla today is the 25th of November 2018. Tesla stock price is down $12 or maybe 2% yesterday on news that Tesla has decided to match the low pricing for or lowering the prices of their Chinese vehicles to address the fact that the tariffs have lowered the sales overall. My take on this is the fact that any news that comes out, the stock market tends to move very strong to the negative, and if it's therefore found out that this news is not significantly impacting the stock, people will come back in happily. I think it's a very scary time for the stock market with many companies doing poorly, especially oil folks. So until we get into the pre-earnings announcement, or even we have announcements about the number of Model 3s produced and shipped, I think we end up with a continued jittery market where any good or bad news, primarily the bad news, can really shift the stock quickly south. I wanted to, so hence, I do think the Chinese news that we were talking about is bad. It means Tesla earns less money, but on the flip side, they do end up being able to get rid of inventory that might be sitting there and prepare for the fact that Tesla's going to start assembling in China. So I don't think it's a bad idea to make sure you have vehicles moving through the system rather than sitting during a certain period of time. And especially the case with the X and S, given that there are a lot of consumers that are now started ordering. They're going to be waiting on those new vehicles to hit the marketplace, and therefore might actually be slowing down the amount of purchasing they're doing. Wanted to thank all of you for the comments you've been making, etc. You know, they can definitely be seen. The general trend that I see emerging right now is that I believe that we're 4 weeks away from a new earnings announcement from Tesla. So we're about a week away from analysts using the number of Model 3s being produced and sold as a way to kind of figure out where Tesla stock should be going based on their ability to deliver on the earnings that we talked about previously. You know, based on the fact that a whole bunch of variables, including the fact that Tesla employees are working through the holidays to make sure that batteries are being produced to deliver those cars, etc. I think we're in great shape relative to what's going to happen with the numbers that Tesla generates. The only dilemma or challenge that lurks is, you know, will Tesla get to and stay over that 360 number, given that to some extent you have a crashing stock market around the ears of Tesla in the process. So stay tuned. It's nice to see that Tesla has the option of paying with the cash, or the market, or the stock market has been supportive of the stock price enough so that we're seeing a rising price to support what the company is doing. Before I get into my next segment, I want to thank Jerry and Bob and others that have been making comments. I think those, you know, all of them have been valid. One of the things I'm worried about with Tesla is the fact that the number of news reports of people who have cars that have had damage to their vehicle and the length of time prior to repair is definitely a concern. We're actually doing some research right now, which we'll cover in future shows, where we kind of have a friend that's working at the factory. And I just learned from one of the parts companies associated with Tesla that if you have someone that's there at the factory that can pick up a part, in this case we're talking about glass from a break-in, you can actually go there, purchase, pick up, and then deliver to where the vehicle is supposed to be repaired to expedite the process. This is one of the items we're going to be confirming over the next few days, and I wanted to note that it's an item that we're working on. Another area that we're working on for our next show focuses on what's going on with the black semi prototype for Tesla. As you all know, there have been a silver and a black vehicle that were produced, and one of the questions that popped up is, why did Tesla bother to produce the black semi prototype if it wasn't going to be out on the road? And based on some analysis, what we concluded is that the target for that truck is actually what's called drayage. So as you know, there's a large business out there for moving containers that have come in to ports, from the port to either rail yards nearby or possibly short or long-term storage in short distances away. Most of those communities that abut these are not happy because they're using diesel vehicles that pollute a lot. and the freight is a constant phenomenon. Los Angeles comes to mind, but obviously there are many ports around the world that are in this. There have been many electric vehicles that are doing very short distances to support this, basically from the ship to a rail yard under a mile away. And so there's a fairly huge market of 10, 20, 30-mile range for these trucks. And if you look at the black version of the semi, you'll notice that it doesn't have the long-term, as in freeway size air baffles on top of the truck, etc. Um, that's a good point. Could be converted, but I really think that the market it's focused on is the drayage market, even though it could do other things like, short tows, etc. That does make sense. Um, the the folks at the ports are actually willing to pay a lot more than others because they have a monopoly and can charge more if they need to pay for the vehicles they want. So we're seeing cases where, for example, with the BYD truck in Oakland, the test vehicles, they're paying $250,000 per truck in order to have electric test vehicles that they can use. And so basically, those monopolies of the ports are eager to find electric solutions and are willing to pay for it. Um, you know, good point, Vladimir, regarding the European market. The port market globally has the same problem. There, anywhere near the water is valuable real estate, and when you have that valuable real estate, nobody wants to smell diesel fuel all the time, and so all the communities, whether Europe, China, or the United States, or other places, are willing to pay more in order to solve this problem. And I think this is definitely the case. So, you know, we're going to have more on that black truck going forward, but you will notice that the battery capacity slash aerodynamic capacity of the vehicle is not similar to the silver truck, but it really shows off the possibility of what that truck can do in certain dedicated markets. And I think that drayage market is definitely the target for the truck, hence why you don't see it on the road. I am pleased to see that Tesla chose to have not one but two vehicles that are being tested, because you know, the issue is that it doesn't need to be, if you're doing testing, it's better to have two vehicles than one, because any of your findings are spread over more than one vehicle, etc. I also believe that we're in a tough situation right now, because it's our belief that there's a challenge that's going on, which is, there's Tesla's capabilities right now for production is 7,000 a week times 52 weeks. So call it 350,000 vehicles a year is what Tesla can produce. And I think there's demand for 100,000 cars a year in the United States each year. But I also think there's enough demand in Europe and Asia to consume the entire 350,000 vehicles. So given that the truck is actually waiting on the ability of Tesla to produce batteries for the truck, I think this strong demand of the Model 3 is really going to affect when the trucks begin their delivery process. And so it's just going to be a long slog until Tesla builds enough batteries to then expand to a larger number of both cars and trucks. So I think this is really going to force a delay on the semi. If in fact, Asia and Europe don't demand as many cars, one could think that trucks would come out sooner, but I don't think that's likely, again, because the Model 3's cost is so compelling in Europe. Jerry, excellent question regarding what's going on with the Model 3 expansion. The issue is they've indicated that they were 2 years ahead in getting to 35 gigawatt hours. So the battery capacity is done. but they're now working on adding lines to add capacity to the. They need basically more automated production facilities. So Tesla's indicated by the end of the year they'll have at least two, if not three more automated battery production lines, so that the packs can be put together in an automated fashion and then inserted into um, that portion of the car, if you will. The real question mark that I don't think anybody knows, and we're all looking up for to find out, is how long is it going to take? They've elected to go from 35 gigawatt hours of production, which I believe is 3 to 500,000 cars, to 110 gigawatt hours, or 3 times the size of the plant. And they're going to be building this systematically. So it's my belief then that perhaps every 6 months you'll be able to add 100,000 cars worth of capacity, but they're 6 months will add more car capacity, but the problem is that you next have to build the automated line capacity to support the new ability to build packs. So I think 6 months will get you, let's say, 20% increase in capacity, but I think we're 2 years at least away from being at a 3 times the size plant, which would allow Tesla to easily produce 1 million cars, as well as start jumping into large numbers of trucks. Great question about the truck building. They actually have a location for it that's been in process for the last year, a few miles from the main factory. The problem with the trucks is that until they stabilize the number of sort of folks who've ordered and received their Model 3, trucks don't go to production. So we were targeting middle of this year, but I think that once sales of the Model 3 in Europe open up and we see how many people want it both in Europe and Asia, the truck is really waiting on battery capacity being available, because it's somewhat being hampered, or it's being affected by the fact that Tesla's trying to get the Model 3s out there. So I think the trucks are ready to go. It's just they don't have battery capacity for it. Lathrop is one place, Bob, but there's actually 1 million square feet of space that they purchased leased last year in Livermore, California, and it's right next to a rail line. But they have so many things going on in terms of production increases. For example, I really think that one of the problems that Tesla's having right now is that building cars in a tent has worked, but it's introducing errors that have to be repaired later to the performance models of the Model 3. So I actually believe that the Lathrop facility will be the start of the effort by Tesla to have capacity, because they just don't need to add 500 to 1,000 cars. They need to add between 5,000 and 7,000 cars a week, and it's hard to see that capacity coming out of the Fremont plant. So I think that's what happens at the Lathrop facility that you've heard about. Well, the problem is when you're building a car by hand, you can't track errors like you can when it's being built in an automated line. And so with many of the functions being automated with machinery, you'll know if there are errors. And I feel bad for the folks who are getting the performance, because I am reading or hearing about folks finding issues there, but I think they'll be fixed. It just makes it a little bit more challenging to get that done when you're building in a tent. And I suppose they have heat, but it is kind of cold in those tents right now too. So that's another variable I think that's lurking out there. Any rate, we're sort of in a heavy production zone. I definitely appreciate all of you taking time out once again. I wanted to remind you, it's not even machines. The fact is that the Performance Edition, it's kind of a different car under the hood, than the standard models that are on the line. So they had to go to the tent in order to get more throughput, and also the unique attributes of that performance edition. Um, Wanted to remind you guys, I'm about to do my 20 leg lifts per leg. Make sure you don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, to make sure you don't get acid indigestion and therefore cancer. 4 hours better to let it digest. Um, I need to get a tennis ball to do the exercise we talked about, which is stretching the plantar fasciitis. So running your foot over a tennis ball or a golf ball as a way to stretch out that underfoot area is another sort of exercise method that's been recommended, and I think it's a great idea. Um, Getting cold here on the Northeast. Wanted to encourage you also to stay warm. Again, happy holidays. Thank you for taking time out to join us. Look forward to any and all comments, beneath. Reminder to like and subscribe, and we could definitely use some help on Patreon if you would. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, lehitrot, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, farvel, adios, and Nuff Respect Walk Goodman. Have a great day, and thanks for joining us. Okay, this is not properly operating.